Okay, and good evening, Democrats.
Good
Good
evening.
evening, Democrats.
Let's get some people unmuted here. Everybody go in for the big, loud, good evening, Democrats.
Good evening, Democrats.
That's more like it. That's the sound of a party that just had a huge victory, obviously, this past month with the defeating the recall campaign. Governor Newsom won that race by a wider margin than he won in 2018 in his original race against John Cox. And that's a testament to all the work that you and all of us in this club and our partner clubs have been doing, phone banking and canvassing and texting and postcarding. So thanks to all of that work that we've all done. Gavin Newsom is still the governor, no Larry Elder for now. And we'll see if he decides to come back in the election or if he's going away. We'll see. But in the meantime, it's exciting news because right now it's time to sign up for your 2022 Santa Monica Democratic Club membership. I know I'm probably not the only one who has that bookmark on their calendar every year, the first day that you can sign up for the next year's Santa Monica Dem Club membership. But in case you didn't have it bookmarked, now you know that if you sign up for Santa Monica Democratic Club membership today, it will be good all the way through the end of 2022. So you sign up today and you'll be able to vote in all of our endorsements next spring, our board election, and the endorsements for next fall, and when we have our fall election, all the races here in Santa Monica. So now's the time to do it. $35 for an individual, $50 for a family, which is 2 tickets, 2 memberships, and $15 for a student or low income. And really, if you need any amount, we can honor, because we don't turn anybody away for funding. We're really excited to have you as a member. So reach out if you'd like to become a member. Mike Soloff is here, our membership VP, and he can get you situated. In the meantime, here in the chat, there's our link to sign up. It's been updated with the 2022 dates, so you can sign up right now. 2022 is going to be a big year for Santa Monica Democratic Club. We've got lots of endorsements early in the year, so the sooner you sign up, the better. In fact, we can announce now the 2022 board election will be on our January 26th meeting. And we're going to have some open seats. We're going to have some vacancies on our board because we're expanding the size of the board. We'll explain that a little bit later this evening. So we do have vacancies. We are looking for more people to join the board, and we're taking applications. So if anyone's interested in joining the executive board of this club or is just thinking about it, just reach out to me or another board member. We can fill out this form, which I just put in the chat now, and you can sort of just send in your interest through that form. And if you've already, I know there's some people I see here who have already reached out to indicate that they were interested a few months ago when we had a vacancy, and we want all of those people to know that we have your information, and we're definitely there. You're definitely on the top of our list as well. We just wanted to open it back up again, just as we have more spots. So just let us know about that. Now, speaking of new board members, I'm very pleased to introduce the newest board member of our executive board, who we appointed since the last membership meeting. So everybody, please welcome Kimberly Miles Lawson.
Yay!
Happy to be here. Happy to help.
Thanks, Kimberly. And so Kimberly sort of got involved with our club, both through the Diversity and Inclusion Committee and also through her role at Santa Monica College, where she's really involved in the community there. And so we're really, that is a goal that a lot of us have talked about for a while, is connecting the SMC community with SMDC.
Yeah, I'm on a Zoom call
So,
right now. I'd have to get back to you later, but it's probably going to be too late. What's your schedule like tomorrow?
I'm going to mute Gil there. Okay, so moving on. So welcome, Kimberly. We're so glad to have you on the board and so glad to have you as part of the team. Also announcing before we get started, our next meeting will be November 17th. We're going to be discussing women's reproductive justice, and especially in light of the law that recently passed in Texas, which effectively bans abortion. And we're pleased to invite our longtime friend of the club, Sandra Flock, to moderate that discussion. And we'll also have the new Santa Monica City Manager, David White, joining us as well. So that'll be our last formal meeting of the year. And we have an important vote that night, November 17th, on our club bylaws. We'll be discussing that more in detail later at the end of the program, but that vote is next month. So we'll be discussing the bylaws changes tonight. And then on November 17th, we'll be voting on them. And then stay tuned for information about our December holiday party. We're looking into our options there. The board is discussing having a little weekend picnic, maybe in one of the parks in Santa Monica, to see each other in a safe way. Okay, so with that, I don't see Secretary Amy Bishop Dunbar here, so I'll just review our board motions from the last board meeting. Unfortunately, because Amy's not here, I don't have the makers and seconders, but I do have the motions. We voted to approve the minutes from the previous board meeting. We voted to approve the proposed amendments to the bylaws, which we'll be discussing, which we've emailed out now already, and we'll be discussing later tonight. We voted to recommend an endorsement on the Fair Work Week LA initiative, which will be coming up in just a few minutes. And we voted to approve the board having an opportunity to go on a retreat. And that's something that is exciting to me. It's something we've been working on for several months, and we've finally been able to put it together. But it does require the approval of the membership here, because we are going to spend, we voted to allocate up to $2,500 of our funds toward this retreat. And we just wanted to make sure the membership understood what we're doing here. We're going to hire a facilitator to come in to help us work together to figure out our agenda for 2022, build a really cohesive board that is going to come back in the beginning of the year in January for the election with a really strong plan for what this club is going to do in 2022, how we're going to meet our objectives of electing Democrats, both locally in Santa Monica and also involved with our federal elections and state elections, that we have a lot of stuff we have to take care of in 2022, a lot of important elections coming up. And so this retreat is designed to help the board come together and focus on that, putting together that agenda. So with that said, I want to know if there's a motion to approve all of the board actions there.
I would make the motion to approve those actions. Thank you.
Thanks, Raina. And it was seconded by Nancy Greenstein. So any discussion? Otherwise, all in favor of the motion? Okay, thank you. You can put your hands down. And I counted 16 hands up. Okay, and everyone can, or I'm clicking through, lowering the hands. Okay, and then all who oppose? Okay, one opposed? Or is that Barbie? Is that what, did you vote no, or is that your hand already up?
I think my hand was already up from the last
Okay,
vote, not
great.
no.
Okay, good. So there's no votes, any abstentions? Okay, great. So the motion passes and all of those items are approved. And now we'll move on to our updates from the Diversity and Inclusion Committee with our Diversity and Inclusion Chair, Raina Kirkland. Raina?
Yes, hi, everybody, and let's hope I can get through this without my little Sadie puppy barking. Anyway, it's nice to see all of you. I just wanted to share a couple of updates about our last couple of DNI meetings where we had guest speakers. Santa Monica Council member Christine Parra. She came in October for Hispanic Heritage Month. And it was just wonderful because we really had a great opportunity to get to know her. She opened up. She was very, very vulnerable. And I think all of us just left feeling that she's someone who we can go to talk to, someone who is going to be supportive of issues of diversity in the community, and just someone who genuinely cares. So it was a great opportunity to connect with her there as our guest speaker. And then let's see, and then, sorry, actually September 15th to October 15th was Hispanic Heritage Month. And so she was there during that time period. And then in late October, just a couple of nights ago, we had council member Constantine Anthony of Burbank, who's also the chair of the Disability Caucus of the California Democratic Party. And he shared about his disability on the autistic spectrum. And it was incredibly enlightening. We learned a lot. And again, he was also very vulnerable in his share. And he talked about the policies that matter to him that he really fights for on behalf of the disability community and within the Democratic Party and beyond. So our committee is just this really wonderful place where guest speakers of different diverse backgrounds come to share and feel very safe in allowing us to get to know them. Much of the Democratic Party is, the base is diversity. And so it's just a great opportunity to be able to facilitate this committee. I'm very grateful to the Democratic Club and the board members who support us in doing so. And we're also just kind of making friends and having a good time. So that's always a good thing to build community. Then I think I can segue now into talking about our civility pledge. Is it a good time now to do that? Okay. So several months ago, we connected on what it means to really treat people of diverse backgrounds in a way that shows understanding and support and connection due to the different challenges that people of diverse communities endure. And we came up with a civility pledge. Co-chair Dan Hall is here, Melissa Goodman, Dolly Sloan. I think so many of us engaged in making this what this is. And I can't say that it's absolutely perfect, but what in life ever is. What I can say is that it's a great start to a really good thing, and something that I think as a Democratic Club we can all be proud of, because I don't know any other clubs that have done anything like this. And I think we can all agree that our culture could always use more civility. So oh, there's Sadie. But I think I'm done, so she's good. So anyway,
Great.
we'd like to.
Thanks, Raina.
vote.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so I brought it up on the screen for folks to see. I think we had a look at it a month ago at our previous meeting. So this is the second chance to take a look at it. But we want to know if there's a motion to approve this civility pledge.
I move to accept it. I move that we approve the civility pledge.
Thanks, Dolly. And is there a second?
Second.
Second, oh, sorry.
Thanks, Dan. So I heard Dolly and Dan. Okay, so let's take a vote. All in favor? Wow, okay, great. We got 23 yes votes. Let's put all the hands down. And then I used to be able to put all the hands down. Now I can only do it one at a time. Oh, my own hand is still up. Okay. All right. And now anyone who opposes, Patricia, you're I got you. Okay. Anybody and Mike, I'm going to lower your hand. Okay. Okay. Now, anybody who would like to vote no? Okay, and not seeing any. Are there any abstentions? Okay, great. So this is great. The civility pledge passes unanimously, and we'll be implementing that, and we'll be talking about it a little bit later, because we're also going to be putting that text that we just voted on into the as an appendix to the bylaws as well. Okay, so our next order of business before we get to our first guest is the Fair Work Week LA initiative. We had the presentation come last month from the Fair Work Week Coalition. But for those who don't remember, this is they're a group that is advocating for comprehensive policy for retail workers, including advance notice of schedules and on-call shifts, being paid for canceled shifts, giving them the last minute changes that happen, allowing them to have flexible working arrangements, and just basically protecting about 140,000 retail workers in the city of LA. And so they came to us last month with the presentation, and we want to see it. They asked us to support this, so our board voted to support. We wanted to ask the membership to support as well. So is there a motion to join this coalition? Yeah, Janice. I think she's just saying so moved. Yes, okay. And is there, there we go.
No, I moved.
Okay, great. And is there a second? Okay, Melissa, great, thank you. So all in favor of joining the Fair Work Week Coalition? Okay, great, it's 22 votes. Put all the hands down. Okay, okay, all the hands are down. Okay, anyone wants to vote no? And any abstentions? Okay, great. We're in the coalition. Good job, everybody. So now we can get to our first guest of the evening. He's running for the LA County Sheriff next year. Cecil Rambo is the Chief of Police at LAX Airport. He worked at the LA Sheriff's Department for 33 years and served as the city manager of Compton from 2017 to 2019 and assistant city manager of Carson before that. So we're really pleased to welcome Chief Rambo to our club, and thanks for joining us, Chief.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
So why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your background and why you're running for sheriff?
Okay. Yeah. And first of all, I want to say hi to Nancy. I've known Nancy since the 90s, Greenstein. So hi, Nancy. How are you?
Cecil.
We go way back. So I started out, I've been in public service since the mid 70s. I started in 1976 as a county lifeguard for Parks and Rec. And then, I worked my way through college with that job and graduated from Humboldt State in 1980 with a degree in sociology. And very shortly after joined the Sheriff's Department in 81. Spent 33 years in that organization and did everything from basic patrol, training officer, sergeant, lieutenant, undercover narcotics for the FBI. I was out at West Hollywood in the late 80s, early 90s with Nancy and Paul Brotzman and young Abby Land and some folks out there then. And when the Rodney King riots occurred, I was a young sergeant there and led a squad of folks during the riots. Then right after that, I went to Internal Affairs and worked on some then police reforms in the Sheriff's Department, along with LAPD's Christopher Commission and our Colts Commission, and promoted to lieutenant in the mid 90s, and went back to Internal Affairs and led another team there that investigated use of force cases and shootings. And then very shortly after that, we had concerned with our relationship with the Asian, the API community. I'm biracial. I'm actually adopted from a Korean orphanage. So I led the Asian Crime Task Force, where we investigated crimes committed by Asians against Asians. And then we also did community outreach in the various API communities. And then went on to captain, the first commanding officer in Compton, when we took over policing there, and again, led some reform issues that were going on. I was doing progressive things before being progressive was a lexicon. Just to show you how far back we go, we had VHS tapes in our police cars back then. So you can imagine trying to manage that data. And we're the only station at the time that had that. By the time I left Compton, the people had put a referendum on the ballot. So because of our community outreach, our embracing organizing and community collaboration, you actually have to vote the sheriff out of Compton. And that is the only contract city like that. I went on to become, commander, and I commanded all the stations from East Los Angeles up to Antelope Valley, and then went on to become a division chief. I commanded all the operations for gang operations at the time. I also had community colleges and the metro rail lines, and virtually every station west of the 110 freeway from Universal Studios to Catalina Island. I retired in 2014 from the Sheriff's Department after 38 years in the county, and then got recruited to be in city management in Carson when they were trying to take over, or at least competing with Inglewood for the NFL. I did that for almost 3 years, and then I went to Compton, really on the heels of their deputy treasurer, one of their deputy treasurers, stealing about $3.5 million in cash. And they needed someone that had my background, familiar with the community, family in the community, friends in the community, embraced the community and understood the community. And so I applied for the city manager job there and was the city manager there for almost 3 years. Retired from city management in 2019, and I got a call from the CEO, then Deborah Flint, at the airport, and she asked me to apply for the chief of police position that was coming open, and I did so, and here I am 2 years later, the chief of police at the airport. I think that given this point in time, we have George Gascon, who I know is in office as a district attorney, very progressive. He and I spoke. I think, this is an important time in history for us in terms of law enforcement and how overall public safety looks. And with my years of experience, not just in law enforcement, but really stepping away and having run cities and understanding how all the pieces fit. I think it's a unique opportunity for a person like me to really lead the Sheriff's Department, which has never had that type of experience lead it before. So I think I have a lot of value to offer the community. And I've obviously been a public servant all of my adult life, and I just simply love it. So I think I have something to offer.
Thanks. I appreciate that. So, 4 years ago, the now incumbent sheriff, Villanueva, came to our club and he said how he was, a progressive, and he was going to be the first Democrat in so many years to become the sheriff. And he was talking about how he was going to take ICE out of the jails. And we were all very excited to hear that platform. And of course, since he's been in office, we've seen he hasn't really lived up to his campaign promises, to say the least. And I know a lot of folks, the official policy of this club is we rescinded our endorsement and called for him to resign. So it's not exactly holding our cards back. What's your assessment, of Sheriff Villanueva's tenure, and how would you be a contrast from what he's done so far?
Mhm. Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways you can have is, he was a lieutenant, and quite frankly, he didn't have the experience to manage the organization. The other part is I had never known him to do what would be categorized as progressive things as a law enforcement official, because one, he was a lieutenant, and two, he never demonstrated that. And even at the rank of sergeant, when I worked with Nancy in West Hollywood, we really embraced the LGBT community. We helped work with the parades and the Christopher Street West events, and really, that community at the time, if you remember in the late 80s, early 90s, there was the AIDS virus was just coming to fruition. It was very, very contentious and acrimonious. It was very politically hot. Wilson was the governor at the time. There was a lot of demonstrations. And, we really embraced and worked with constitutional, rights for folks that could demonstrate. So this dates back to the 90s. And then you fast forward to behaviors that I demonstrated in Compton, and even as a law enforcement official through my career. That's the difference. One, I've demonstrated it, I've done it. This is not new to me. I don't have to change my behavior. And Alex just wasn't prepared. And so he's a classic example. If you want to test someone's character, give them power.
Sure. So obviously, when this election takes place in the shadow of this larger national reckoning with race that's been going on, and we've seen lots of incidents around LA County over the last few years of conflicts between law enforcement and protesters that have taken different forms in different places. Santa Monica had one situation, other areas had different situations. But what would be your overall approach as the chief law enforcement officer of the county to lessen those tensions between protesters and the law enforcement to try to have a community that's working together?
Yeah. So I think really dialogue ahead of time is really important. So having enough of that social bank account before something like that happens. I can tell you that having looked at the way riots really begin, and having been in a couple of them now, that in the very beginning, they're very emotional. So you really have to, emotions are running very high. You really have to get some communication with the leaders out there as soon as you can. And then I noticed in some of the demonstrations, depending on where you were, they were kind of hijacked by folks that didn't have the best interests of the First Amendment folks in mind. And so making sure that you actually can kind of siphon out those folks and not indiscriminately treat the crowd, everybody can't be treated the same way. Conversely, on the other hand, like in Santa Monica, people were really dismayed at the destruction and the level of how kind of crazy it got and how quickly it got. And they really wanted law enforcement to be a little more assertive. I think there's a time and place for that. I think certainly as the chief law enforcement officer in LA County, you understanding the whole mutual aid concept, that as a sheriff, I can get together with LA County chiefs and we can talk about how we can better serve each other in those instances. Because when demonstrations and riots occur, they usually don't occur all at once. They occur like in sporadic, sometimes spontaneous, or in this case, so social media driven groups. And then staying on top of that as a collective, do the planning ahead of time on how we're going to deal with that issue. So you really want to protect your businesses and your lives, while at the same time allowing people to exercise their First Amendment rights without just treating everyone with this blanket less than lethal, uses of force and tear gas and those kinds of things.
Great, thanks. And the other question I wanted to ask you about is this issue that's been going on since before Sheriff Villanueva came in, but has only gotten worse, which is the gangs inside the department. So can you explain a little bit about what that means for people who don't know and how it got that way and what you would do to fix the situation?
Yeah, so for folks who are kind of just catching up on what they're talking about with deputy gangs is that, certain stations in the department have, what could be tantamount to like subgroups or cliques that they have station pride. Generally, they're the areas that have more violence and more social, issues going on. Compton, Willowbrook, South LA, where I grew up in South LA, quite frankly. So there's this band of brothers type of atmosphere. And when I came on in the early 80s, a lot of our supervisors were Vietnam vets, Korean War vets, who sometimes bring those subcultures to the organization. As we move forward into to the crack cocaine era, to the gang, I wouldn't say glorification, but at some point gangs became relatively mainstream. Snoop Dogg and all these guys, glorified and really are celebrated as gang members. And you guys have probably all seen a picture of me back in the 80s throwing up a sheriff's sign like that. But, the bottom line is they filmed the movie Colors at Carson, and that was 1984. And obviously I had hair then. That's actually proof of hair at that time. But, we didn't realize at the time that, these things would manifest themselves later. So unfortunately, what Alex is doing is, and he doesn't realize clearly that he's trying to win over the love of the deputies, like he's their protector. He doesn't realize that it's really their job and our job as law enforcement is to have public trust. And it erodes public trust to have groups like that are somewhat intimidating, that people perceive as untrustworthy. And I helped Mike Gibson write the 958 bill, which talked about law enforcement gangs. And if they commit these crimes, they got to go to jail. So my position is, if I'm sheriff, the first thing I do is the ones that need to be prosecuted are going to get prosecuted. The ones that are need to be investigated administratively will get administratively investigated. And 3, you got to let you have to let them know where you stand on that position. In fact, the union has called me already, kind of upset because I'm acknowledging these groups, that they're gangs. So, to change your culture requires a lot. Some of it is just straight out attrition. Others, having been a training officer, I can tell you who trained you is important, because they teach you culture in the organization. So the right selection of training officers, the right selection of captains, and the right selection of middle managers and sergeants is vitally important. And couple that with training in Sergeant Super School, FTO school, training school, the academy. So it becomes part of the culture that you train and celebrate. And then you get what you celebrate. And if you're celebrating these gangs, or you're celebrating mass arrests and just taking people to jail, then that's what you're going to get more of. And so my role as a sheriff is to let people know that we can have a safe public, and celebrate those times when they can engage the community, celebrate those times when they can actually get out and build youth programs and build relationships with the kids, and keep them out of trouble as best we can, by bringing them into the Explorer programs, Parks and Rec programs. And then, my knowledge working in the cities, a lot of people don't know, for instance, Compton has a 2-acre campsite in the middle of the city. Why can't we have a camping outward bound program where we teach leadership and certain skill sets with our youth in that particular campground? And the sheriff's department can be a motivating factor, as well as fund some of those programs.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have to move on to our next panel, but we really appreciate your time, and we'll hopefully have you back again sometime soon. And we'll look forward to, the club taking up this race. It's a really important election that's coming up.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Great.
So,
Thanks
Nancy,
so
talk
much.
to you later. Okay. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you. So now we're going to move to our main program of the evening, which is discussing the response to our climate emergency. And obviously, the news is been getting worse with this situation, and we're not seeing. Maybe I'll be convinced by the panel that I'm wrong, but I've seen a lot of negative news on this, and we decided that it would be a good time to refocus, our efforts on this issue of the climate crisis, the climate emergency. And we've got a really all-star panel with us tonight of speakers coming at this from all different perspectives. So let me introduce some of our speakers here. Senator Henry Stern from our neighboring 27th Senate District has made issues of the environment and energy one of the focal points of his career, authoring bills that attack climate change and increase the use of renewable energy. Senator.
Thanks for having me, John.
And Igor Tregub, who's the CDP or California Democratic Party Environmental Caucus Chair, and also serves as a rent control board member in Berkeley, California, one of our sister cities that has a rent control district. Good to see you, Igor.
Good to see you. And formerly on the Berkeley Rent Board, but formerly and presently and in the future, a huge fan of Santa Monica and everything you do.
Thanks, Igor. And when we first met Lorraine Lundquist at this club when she was running as an LA City Council candidate, and she was actually one of our last in-person guests in February 2020. It seems so long ago. Lorraine is an astrophysicist, research scientist, and now serves as a faculty associate at the Institute for Sustainability at CSU Northridge. Lorraine?
Hello, thank you everyone for having me.
Great to see you. And Aura Vasquez says she's been an environmentalist since she was 11 years old in her native Colombia. And since then, she's been a grassroots organizer for the Sierra Club, commissioner at the LA Department of Water and Power. And of course, we know her here at this club as she serves as our own executive board member to the California Democratic Party. Aura?
It's good to be here. Hi, everyone.
And finally, Fatima Iqbal Zubair lives in Carson and teaches chemistry and environmental studies at Watts. Through this role, she's become an outspoken advocate for the environment. She's also an executive board member of the CDP from the 64th Assembly District, where she's also currently a candidate for the Assembly in 2022. And Fatima also serves as the vice chair of the CDP Progressive Caucus.
Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you all here. So I think let's start with the big picture view on climate change. So we last had a meeting dedicated to this topic about 2 years ago, and then Environmental Caucus Chair R.L. Miller was not particularly optimistic about where things were heading on a global scale. Now, Trump was president then, so it's a little different, but let's just summarize, I think, where things have gone in the last few years and where things stand from a global scale, how things progressed in anyone's opinion. Anybody, feel free to.
I really want to start on that note. It's going to get grim here quickly, John.
I think so, yeah, but let's set the scene.
I mean, we've been on fire. Now the drought is fully west-wide. Carson, go down to Carson. Just go try to breathe in Carson. Yeah, I hear you. I see you. Aliso Canyon and Playa and, our gas addiction in LA grows and grows. The part that scares me is like, even the people that you want to count on, like when you think, where's the heartland of progressive climate warrior work? It's like, it's here, right? I mean, we're doing it, LA, California. And then when we come up short or, duck the tough issues, then you start to get a little bit concerned. So, I mean, there's a national trend where Joe Manchin's holding up the entire plan basically just for the coal industry. And then at a downscaled version, here in California, we've got some funding through. There's been some money moving, which is a good thing. And some, I don't want to disparage, there's been some good victories here and there, but I think on the big stuff, even California is way behind. We're still the largest petroleum economy in the entire world behind the US and China. We consume more than any other nation on earth, just in California. I think LA consumes more than, I think it's like the 10th largest consumer of petroleum on earth as a nation. So we're still kind of, the oil wells are still pumping. Pregnant women are still getting hurt disproportionately. Communities of color by the freeways. I mean, I guess we're running, but it feels like we're running backwards. I don't know what the other panelists think, but from a PPM perspective, we're on the path to, most of our airports being gone. We're gonna have probably 130-degree days in the San Fernando Valley in about a decade. Like 121, they say the projection by like the 2040s is like it'd be 130 out in Canoga Park. So it's kind of gnarly, John.
Yeah, temps are high. Go ahead, Fatima. Yeah.
Yeah, I can share. Yeah, thank you, Senator Stern. I think it's a really good overview of what's happening, right? For me, climate change and environmental justice is one of those issues that's really cross-sectional, intergenerational. And I'm finding that, in my district for sure, like whether someone is a homeowner, a renter, a young person, an older person, they all care about, the air they breathe, the water they drink, right? And the places where they live and making sure it's a healthy environment. For me, it's also about just clean water, right? I'm in a community that includes Carson. We're going through that, what you talked about right now. And we're frankly not getting answers. And we don't have, and it's again, a very reactive strategy to when these things happen. We don't have the roots of what's causing even, toxicity to be released, being addressed yet, right? So for me, climate change and environmental justice is one of those things where it's our temperatures are rising. We can talk about it in a very global perspective. We can talk about droughts, but we can't forget locally how it's affecting people day to day, and the intersectionality of bringing that now with low-income communities of color. It's a way, to perpetuate racism, frankly. When you think about how our laws are created, and environmental injustice is perpetuating racism. As an example, my district, District 64 does 33% of California's refining. And it's over 90% people of color, fifth lowest income in the entire state, right? That is the picture of environmental racism. We have so many parts, places in Compton, Watts, like in the school I work, that don't have clean water, right? My school was literally on a toxic landmine, was built not following environmental code. The football field had lead and arsenic toxicity, right? And so I think that's what it is. It's I want people to understand the urgency. This isn't something that we have time to wait, not even a month to wait, in my opinion, right? This is something that is affecting people day to day, and then connecting that to the health outcomes, right? The issue is that when we now talk about these issues happening in these communities, guess where there's higher rates of cancer, and asthma, and nosebleeds, and headaches, right? And it's causing those awful health outcomes and perpetuating, the statistics that we see happening, in low-income communities, right? And frankly, what frustrates me, I think, and R.L. Miller shared this too, I'm so inspired by her, is that we know all this is happening, right? Democrats claim to know the science, but we haven't had a good climate bill in the legislature since 2018. That's not going to cut it. That is awful. That is despicable. As Senator Stern said, California should be leading the way, but we are not. In fact, we are falling behind, compared to what we should be doing. And it's hurting people. I don't want my 7-year-old son and my students to grow up in this kind of environment anymore. I want them to have a future. I want them to live longer. I want, Black women to be not have so many preterm births and have healthy pregnancies, right? And I think the thing that I hope that the club gets from this and the Democratic Party gets from this, and I hope, Senator Stern, this resonates, where you're working, is that waiting a day, waiting a month is too late. That this has been affecting California the world for decades. And if we don't address it, we are frankly just as bad, in my opinion, as those that serve to perpetuate the systems that continually oppress us. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment. And yeah, I did actually, I'm so glad you brought a lot of that up, because I wanted to make sure we foregrounded in this conversation the concepts of environmental justice and how communities of color have been disproportionately affected by climate change, because it's something that I think has become more and more apparent over the last few years. And it's certainly a big part in what you were saying, the urgency of this moment, because it's not something that's hypothetical in any shape or form. It's happening to communities right now. Yeah, Lorraine.
Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting that. I mean, I think it's so important to bring this to the personal level and what's happening to communities, the impact that burning fossil fuels is having on marginalized communities in particular, and on all of us. Just to give a little bit more of the history, as you were asking for the question.
That's a roll call vote.
Hang on just a sec. So to give a little bit of a history, the time when we were looking at President Trump being elected, I think most climate activists were really focused on making sure that the Democratic platform was the strongest piece of climate action that we could handle. And and we were still really afraid that that would not be enough. And then we had this devastating loss where Trump won, and we pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. And then we've basically focused on local and state level action since then, which has come somewhere, but not nearly far enough. And now we have the Biden administration. We've said that we're coming back into the Paris Accord, and Biden did have an aggressive climate plan in terms of what he's introduced for his administration. But this is really a do or die moment when we're looking at the reconciliation package that's before Congress right now. And, taking climate pieces out of that, as Senator Manchin wants to do, is a really terrifying prospect. It's essentially like pulling out of the Paris Accord a second time, because it's not clear that we can really fulfill anything that we say that we're going to do in the Paris Accord without taking strong climate action. And this seems to be, with the current Congress that we have in place, perhaps the one opportunity to do this, or to do something on climate action. So it's terrifying. The UN is saying this is a code red for humanity. We have to act boldly. We have to act now. And it's just heartbreaking for all of us, I'm sure, on this call to watch what's happening, in terms of so many different losses and challenges to even sort of moderate climate action at the national level and even at the state level as well.
If I may take it away from here. So I want to just touch upon the IPCC report, which now we know about and take a little more seriously this year, giving us 10 years to basically a point of no return. We have reached levels of CO2 in our atmosphere that are basically irreversible, but that is hope. But I want to center our conversation about more hyper-local issues, like neighborhood oil drilling, which we had so much courage at the county level to stop it. But this took decades of a fight for it to happen. We just dumped 126,000 gallons of oil in our beautiful ocean in Huntington Beach. I cannot believe that in the coast of California, iconic coast of California, we still have that practice. It's unbelievable. We also just dump a bunch of, what are the sounds here. 16,000 gallons of sewage in the Santa Monica Bay. How are we all feeling about how we treat our waste? Because it's not just about energy. I mean, I was a commissioner for water in power. The way that we treat our water, where we get it from indigenous communities, is really something that we need to start thinking about, because we can only continue with distracting economy for so long before we're gonna all pay for it, and we already are paying for it. I also want to just talk about, we are a democratic club, and I am on the e-board, and I'm gonna let Igor speak more about our introduction to a piece of legislation, I guess, for our California Democratic Party to talk about contributions for the fossil fuel industry. But friends, how are we showing up in solidarity for communities of color that want to be represented by other people of color? So people like Fatima, people like myself that have run for office in the past, where are the environmentalists standing for us? We see this very well played out with the Republicans and the conservatives. They unify and they move forward. We got to get smarter about this. We got to get the fossil fuel influence of money in our political process. We also really need to revise what is it like to stand in real solidarity and with a real strategy as environmentalists. Because I see over and over, and I'm told, and Lorraine, you also ran for office, you can speak about this very clearly, that environmental champions don't win elections. We have to change that. We have to. And if we want to see a world free of fossil fuels, where we have a real energy democracy with microgrids, where communities of color can benefit, where we stop, the consumption of oil and gas and coal, not just in California, but in our whole country, we're gonna have to start elected people that are gonna be aligned with those goals and that are gonna bring jobs to our local economy and are gonna help us prosper. So I'm gonna stop there. But thank you for that question.
Thanks, Aura. And yeah, we're going to come back to in a little bit the Democratic Party issue that you brought up. Definitely want to touch on that, but I want to hit on some of these policy issues overall first, and we're going to come back to that. I wanted to look back at the Biden administration. If anyone would like to comment on what some of the biggest shifts have been, maybe this will be a positive, one of the positive parts of the discussion. What have been some of the biggest shifts so far that he's been able to do, aside from just signing the Paris Agreement since Trump is out of office? And then also looking at the infrastructure plan and looking at what is in that plan, or at least as far as we know, that will be really, strong climate goals that will help us reach our goals. What do you all see as going on there?
Well, I can start, and I am certainly not an expert in the Biden plan. I left the Department of Energy earlier this year. I made it through. I was kind of the last line of defense in the Trump administration, and then once it was in good hands, I left to work on distributed generation in California. But one thing that I'm very excited about, and my former boss, DOE Secretary Granholm, former Governor Granholm, loves to talk about this. There is a concrete plan right now that says we need to double our solar in the next 5 years. That's all types of solar, including both utility scale and rooftop scale. And then what we have to do next is to double it again from 2025 to 2030. So we have to quadruple the output. And this was more than just a random proclamation. It wasn't as detailed as a white paper, but it is it can be seen as a policy document. And she has been great on the stump about this. We hosted her in my neck of the woods on Stalin Chechenyo land in Berkeley a couple months ago. We had a press conference on automated rooftop permitting for solar. And she talked about it because solar is a pathway, not just towards a just transition, but to get towards electrification. Unfortunately, and I'm going to talk about this later, we are at the precipice right now where in about 6 weeks, the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, is going to issue a decision known as Net Energy Metering 3.0. And what the utilities want to do, we're going to talk about this as well, because it's Sempra that funds the Democratic Party right now, in part. Sempra owns 2 utility companies. PG&E is the other one up north. You know what they want to do? They want to kill 40% of California's renewable energy in the form of local and community solar. How do they want to do that? Talk about this later too, but they want to raise the utility rates on solar customers by 200%, including low income and fixed income folks. So just as the Biden administration is doing a lot of important work. And right now, really, this is, you know, I have to say, I'm very disappointed in now Senator Kirsten Sinema. I knew her back in the day when we were part of an organization together for elected leaders. And I don't know where this is coming from. And like, there are 2 people that are basically responsible, 2 Democrats, or at least they call themselves Democrats, who are responsible for reducing what was already a compromise. $3.5 trillion was a step down from the 6 to 8 trillion that Bernie proposed, but now they're trying to get it down to something. At least they're now talking, which is good, because the Democratic Party, really the future of the Democratic Party in the next year, this all rests in the balance. They have to pass an infrastructure plan. It has to include a real, clear, credible pathway into the green economy. It has to include a just transition. I don't know how you're going to do it in $1.5 trillion, frankly, but at least it's an important start to get there. And we need to do everything we can to pass this plan.
I couldn't agree more. It's really such it's hard to overstate how critical this particular plan is. I mean, this is our one chance basically to pass any meaningful climate legislation for quite a while. Just likely with not only the current Congress, but also you know, what the map looks like for the next elections and all of the incredible threats to democracy that we're seeing across the country in red states. You know, things are not looking good for Democrats in the future. And so I just want to say a little bit about what is in what's in the reconciliation package. There's about $210 billion in climate support in the reconciliation bill. The $150 billion of that is the Clean Electricity Performance Program. So that is the specific thing that Senator Manchin has come out against and says he won't vote for reconciliation if that is in the package. And that's about 1/3 of the emissions reductions that are included in the full infrastructure package. So he's just chopping that out. You know, at least as Igor said, that at least they are talking and perhaps he will get there. But, you know, he has stated publicly that he won't vote for it if it's in there. And I want to say, you know, that would cost about $150 billion. And by the way, what it would do is it would require that utilities increase their clean energy output by 4% per year. Actually not require, it gives you a penalty if you don't, and it actually gives incentives, money to utilities that do. And so we in LA, well, in LEDWP, at least I know, is increasing about 3.3% per year, but we're not at 4%, and we're one of the highest ones. I know this is Santa Monica, so I'm not sure exactly what Edison is doing, but it's also like not quite at 4%. Most utilities aren't at 4%, so this really would make a big difference, even in California, where we're ahead of the curve in a lot of compared to a lot of other states. And I want to mention that NRDC says that this piece, which would cost 150 billion, would add 900 billion to the economy. So it is a major net gain for everybody. So we really need that piece of the infrastructure plan. And I can talk more about the other things that are also included in the I keep mixing them up. But what I mean is the reconciliation package. But I'll let other people speak.
Can I just piggyback on Dr. Lundquist's point? So if you guys read Dave Roberts, he had a good piece this morning. He has this Voltus. It's like his new blog or whatever, but he used to be he was like the grist guy and he was at Vox. But Dave Roberts, he put out a few of the scenarios about like if Manchin gets his way, can we still get there? Right? I guess that's the current conversation behind the scenes. And the model, there's folks called the Rhodium Group. They did a model where they looked at if the Clean Electricity Performance Plan doesn't make it in as robustly as we want it to be, is there any way to do it? If it's all carrots essentially coming from the feds, can we get there? And the answer is yes, but only if at the subnational and local level, we are hardcore. So that actually may be how all this plays out, is that there's going to be a lot of funding at the federal level, right? There's going to be big time tax credit. There's going to be, electric vehicle charging incentives and, pushing hard on smart agriculture and, all the fronts, clean building, decarb, swapping out, you like heat pumps, they're going to be there. The rebates are going to, so the money, if it's just money basically coming out of Washington and not a lot of sticks with that, maybe they get a few in, maybe they get like a fugitive methane fee, or maybe they get some couple little sticks. But then I was just looking at the scenario with Ava. She was doing some of the modeling analysis for me. So we got to get to 100% light duty vehicle sales by 2035. That's, by the way, the whole country, but we're not, we're at 3% or 4% here. So, we got to, and then 100% zero emission on medium and heavy also. Low carbon fuel standard up to 20% by 2030, 100% by 2035, every state, right? So I can keep going. There's methane and VMTs, and I see some of the great housing advocates, by the way, on the call. So I do want to mention VMTs and land use policy, even though I know I tussle with Andrew on Twitter and some others. But the point is that we're going to have to kind of have an accountability mechanism, just like we want out of post-Paris at the state level and at the local level, that's going to require political accountability on top of that, but really to get numbers driven. So when the ARB does their new scoping plan, or when the governor, now he's done with his recall, right? Is Governor Newsom going to push us all the way there? Are we really going to take those hard steps? Are we going to have those tough engagements with oil and gas that Outer talked about? So that'll be, our stuff at the local level matters more than ever if the political dynamics in DC play out like they're looking. So I don't think it's all bad news out of Washington. I just think they're gonna wimp out on the hard stuff and leave it to us.
Yeah. So when we look at, let's switch gears a little bit then and bring it back to us. So when we're looking at the policies coming out of Sacramento over the last few years, how is California leading the way nationally in terms of the bills that have passed, but also where are the areas that we're failing to make ground? And are there certain types of climate bills in particular that are stalling out, or what are the forces at play? And maybe let's start with Senator Stern, since he's got a firsthand view here that are stopping the progress. I mean, I remember hearing from Senator Allen right after the last session how disappointed he was about his plastic ban that didn't go through. And a lot of those were Democratic votes who either voted no or didn't vote at all when that vote was up. So, I mean, what's going on there? Can you explain that situation?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two wings that we've got to somehow crack through that are currently killing off a wide range of the sort of far-reaching bills. So everything from oil setbacks that died in my committee with 3 Democrats. You know, I was pushing it. I'm the chair of the committee overseeing the entire oil industry in California. I couldn't even muscle the bill out of my own committee. So, you know, there's the reasons people do that. Industry, right? The Western States Petroleum Association is the largest giver in the state of California, state, local, county level. That money's moving. So there's sort of Chamber of Commerce, you know, that set of considerations. But then there's the labor piece. And the troubling things is they've kind of fused now, where you think, you know, I'm labor through and through, right? I come from that, like, and solidarity on all fronts, and you think, okay, you want to be progressive, you're going to be there. Well, go look at some of the votes, and you'll think, okay, this is tried and true progressive legislator. I don't need to call people out. You all can look at the votes, but you're thinking tried and true progressive. But when the LA Labor Federation or the California Labor Federation or like the professional firefighters or SEIU or CTA, when they're coming to committee and testifying against these bills and saying you're going to gut local economy or spout out a talking point, there's a solidarity within labor that's occurring, that those folks realize how important the oil and gas work is to the trades, and who have not seen a compelling enough case to basically bail on their brothers and sisters and say, you know what, SEIU 2015 has hundreds of thousands of men and women who are getting hurt by climate and pollution, extreme heat, you name it. But is it their main reason for being? It's like, well, we're care workers. So should we really roll the building trades in this? And the deference tends to go to the trades. Igor sees this play out, I'm sure, in the party and, legislation committee and all the, the tensions, and Rusty Hicks has to wrestle with this himself and has had his own complications around, are we taking fossil fuel money in the party or not? Are we sort of taking it, but we're not saying we're really taking it? So it's found its way into all this work, but our tensions are the same tensions as the Congress has, right? Like Joe Manchin and that wing, we shouldn't try to be so holy that we say, oh, that would never be us, because we're the same. And to Aura's earlier point, I think one of the big missions in my mind is how we show solidarity, not just on issues of racial injustice or immigrant justice, but also on labor issues, how environmental progressives, when it is time to go help IATSE deal with, the entertainment industry being bad, or SEIU's fighting with the hospital and that we show up and show that solidarity there too. Because right now, I got to be honest, we get dismissed. And, AB 1395 is a perfect example. Also came to the Senate floor, forced to vote on it. That bill would have basically, it actually wasn't even super, super strong by the end. It would have been some shot at carbon neutrality for the state of California and accelerated emissions reductions. But it died pretty pitifully on the Senate floor. And now a bunch of those senators, by the way, are going off to Glasgow to talk about other things, how much money we're spending on things. But again, the hard stuff, right? So offshore oil is going to come up this year. Are we going to keep drilling off our coast in state and federal waters? And how do we deal with that with all the revenue? We're getting $400 million a year off straight in the state and local coffers on that. The wins have been there, right? New member up north, Josh Becker's been doing some great work. He did a cement decarbonization bill. We slipped one past the utilities on trying to shut down the rest of the gas fleet and not letting them keep repowering it over and over and over again and sort of make the transition. So hopefully make the next round of procurement something that's not going to keep Aliso Canyon and Playa open forever. 423, that was, I mean, we've had some wins. Trying to overhaul the oil and gas regulator has been really, really hard. And we're going to have them enforce the heck out of this if we're going to find a way to setbacks. Like, we're going to actually have to have agency competency. So there's room to work. There was a very tense and awkward attack campaign on the Senate, in the body I work, on the pro tem, on Senator Hertzberg, on Senator Waso. There might have been one other. Those are the ones who, by the way, killed the big oil bill in my committee. And it's hard to go through, and people are, it gets awkward, but I'll tell you, the credit they get for killing that bill is a lot bigger than the downside they get out of not, right? And so as tough as it may be to go to a club like this and say, you're mad at me, it doesn't hurt enough to make those decisions right now. It doesn't. And I don't know, we're not seen with the same force that say, labor or even criminal justice reform or LGBTQ rights or all those sort of other underdogs out there. I don't see the environmental caucus having that same sort of natural sway, because it gets wonky and you can kind of parse it, and there's so much money on the other side. So that's a little insight into how the Senate's looking. The Assembly's kind of taken the mantle now as the progressive house in some people's eyes, whereas the Senate under De Leon, right, and what we just had, we passed SB 100, right? We passed Pavley's SB 32 and, moved our 2030 targets up. So we had a brief period of some big progress there. But now we got to go answer the call this year. It's going to be a big year for you all to help in the LA area, to put pressure on us to step up and deliver and not just be talk. It's gonna go down this year. And I think when everyone comes back from Glasgow with a bunch of press releases, you gotta go ask them, like, what's that? What comes after the press release?
Yeah, so if I could add to that, there's a reason I'm also running, and I'm fighting with Igor and other allies, with the Progressive Caucus, the Environmental Caucus, just to expand on what Senator Stern said, right? Here's what it is. The bigger reward he's talking about is the money they're going to get for their next campaign, right? They're going to get that fossil fuel money. They're going to get that building trades money. So, I just want to highlight the campaign that, I've been a part of to remove this money, to get an e-board vote on it, to get it away from the party, and eventually not endorse candidates that take this money. Because if Senator Stern had those sorts of Democrats in his committees, these would be passing unanimously, right? They would be passing the Assembly unanimously. That's the bottom line, right? When he's talking about the rewards, he's talking about money, right? Money talks, right? So one, we got to get the money out, okay? And the second thing is the building trades, right? I've seen them always come up, right? Along with the corporations as a roadblock, and even going to Sacramento, speaking up against these bills, right? And this is no offense at all to Senator Stern, because I know he's a champion. I just think he needs more, right? More folks. But what I'm frustrated about, with Sacramento is that, I'm an educator, so like Lorraine, I'm an academic. I stay the night reading articles, reading and just like learning as much as I can, right? That's something I love to do. Frankly, we don't have enough teachers up there, so I think that would really help, right? Get more academics in there to understand that, we'll do the research, bring all these folks to the table, right? I sat with the building trades just in my campaign. I talked to them. I met with, the head of the building trades in LA. They're not, I'll just say it, they're not bad people. I'm not going to demonize them. I'm not going to demonize, and they have initiatives in their unions that are trying to, lead to electrification, right? So I'm not, I don't want to also, because, a lot of the workers they're representing are in the working class, right? There's some sort of brainwashing happening, right? Either by the corporations or the union bosses to the workers, or, whoever's controlling this narrative, that is simply not true, right? One thing that we haven't talked about yet is what a just transition looks like. Part of the reason I ran and didn't wait till someone's going to term out till 2026, because as a woman of color, I've been asked that. I'm kind of offended when I get asked that. But honestly, the reason I ran is because the time is now, right? If we have leaders that aren't acting on this, not even voting in the right direction, that's the lowest bar you can set, right? Senator Stern is voting, like that is the lowest bar. Fine, have someone else author the bill, just vote, right? That to me is the bare minimum. So if you have leaders not doing that, You need a group to come together with Senator Stern, with other legislators that really care about this. Sit down with folks like Igor, with Aura, like with Lorraine across the state. Bring them to the table. Write a comprehensive Green New Deal. That's not just a punchline, right? What I mean is a multi-page, multi-chapter, whatever it takes report that's going to get us to solar that Igor's fighting for, right? That's going to center, how our waste is disposed of, like Ara talked about, right? That's going to talk about drought in rural California. That's going to talk about refineries and how we transition, because that's going to take a while. I know the infrastructure is in my district, and I know it's going to be hard to change. And that's why, like, someone like me and Ara, like, we don't want to wait, because we know we can't do that without letting the unions down. And I don't, and I'm not saying you do this at all, Senator, but I know you're not doing this at all, but like, for me, like, I support labor. I just feel like, unfortunately, and I'll say this, I feel like, has there really been a comprehensive team at the legislature, at the assembly, at the Senate level, has there been enough progressives? Let me just say it. Sat down, come together with the smartest environmentalists in this nation, with the unions, right? And even maybe with the oil companies, right? Let's all come to the table and talk about what's happening to our planet and transition, right? And I haven't seen that sort of bill, that sort of plan, even come out of Sacramento, right? There was a very brief resolution passed. I think that was less than a page. That to me doesn't cut it. That to me says that, honestly, you might be doing it for show and you're not understanding the urgency, right? That type of hard work hasn't been done. And I know, like, as an educator, that's what I'll do. I know that's what Lorraine would do, and, and as well, and Aura and everyone else here, and I know Senator Stern as well. But I just don't think we have enough of those folks up there. You talked about the state level in your question. One thing I just wanted to again talk about is drilling, right? My district has Wilmington, right? We have 75% of the oil drilling in LA County, so it's a really big issue to me personally. If 1 in 5 of that community have cancer, know someone that has cancer. And we have red states like Texas, like Oregon, that have passed a freaking, excuse my language, buffer zone. We can't even, okay, fine, we need to end oil drilling. We haven't even passed a buffer zone, right? I see drilling happening. I'm going to say this is not said enough, happening right next to where a baby is growing up. I see drilling happening right next to a school, right? What are we doing in California? What the heck are we doing to stop that, right? And I'll just end with this. I mean, we have a supermajority of Democrats, and I want us to think this is a Democratic club, right? What sorts of accountability are we giving our Democrats there? And I'm going to also call folks out inside, and maybe Senator Stern too, right? Sorry, I can't say anything, but we got to care more about people than our caucus up there, right? If there's Democrats not acting, have those conversations, but call them out, because you know what? The people matter more than political allies. And that's what I think. This is a crisis, right? So one, we got to hold them accountable from the outside with groups like Sunrise and, Youth Climate Action, all those groups like Democratic Clubs. But on the inside, the pressure's not happening. And then we got to invest in and support, not just me, good climate candidates, because honestly, I haven't seen a comprehensive Green New Deal come out, and I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it, and it's about time. So just wanted to say that.
Thank
All
you.
right. I want to just say two things. I mean, I think we put a lot of emphasis. We have spoken about the influence of money and politics, and I think all of us, the speakers, have been working really hard to make sure that we curve out. We all sign, pledges and such, but also we're forgetting about the power of us people and the power of organizing. And as a community organizer, I can leave this conversation without saying that, yes, they might have all the money, and yes, they might have all the resources, and yes, they might be more savvy, and yes, they might mentor future elected officials sooner. But we have so much more people, and we forget how powerful we are when we work together. And I think it's really important for us that as we see others having organized money, we also organize people, because that's also powerful. And like I said, this is a Democratic club. And how many times you guys have seen yourselves endorsing maybe not the best environmental candidate? So maybe next time when you have candidates that come by and want your endorsement, think about how bold they're gonna be on climate action. Now that they talk about climate change and the climate crisis, but what bold solutions they're offering because we really don't have time.
And just to second that, I completely agree with Fatima and Aura and Senator Stern and Igor. Right now in California, the oil companies where, in other states, they fund Republican candidates. In California, they know that Republicans just aren't going to get elected in most districts. And so the oil companies are funding Democratic candidates, and they're picking Democrats even to run to further their interests. And they know that this is the way, and it's working. So we have to have these democratic battles between Democrats and elect the right Democrats. And again, we're up against just incredible money, as Senator Stern said. The payoffs aren't good enough for the good senators and assembly members who are voting in the right direction. It's hard for them, and there isn't enough downsides for the people who are siding with the oil companies. And also when it comes to campaigns, we need to do everything we can to get out the money to counter that big oil money and the people power, because it's an awful lot to go up against that oil money combined with the labor money in terms of the labor unions that are aligning with oil companies right now. And, I think we've seen it happen a lot of times, and we gotta figure out a way around it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thumbs up everything that folks have already said. It really resonates with me. Senator Storm, thank you for your leadership. I was so disenchanted when SB 345 died in your committee, and I called Senator Schwartzberg's office. He was one of the swing folks who ended up not voting for it. And they asked me, are you in district? And I said, I used to live in SoCal, and let me give you a piece of my mind. And I talked to him for 1 minute, just appealing to why this was so important. And it's frustrating. I posted in the chat, sorry, I've been posting a lot of things in the chat, but at 8:21, I posted a link. This is the Sierra Club's Tracking Dirty Dollars project. And you're gonna see a lot of folks there that have, I'm not gonna name names, you can find them in here. And some of them on the Senate floor said, no, I am very pure. I don't take oil money. I don't take utility money. I only am doing these bills or are voting against these other good bills because I care about equity. And the word equity has unfortunately become very weaponized for the wrong thing. So let me go back to what this is about. In 2020, Hop Hopkins, one of the senior most national leaders of the Sierra Club, wrote an article that called Racism is Killing the Planet. I will post a link to that shortly. And one of the most trenchant quotes in there is, you can't have climate change without sacrifice zones, and you can't have sacrifice zones without disposable people, and you can't have disposable people without racism. So I know, for folks like me, what that has meant is, in the immortal words of Kendrick Lamar, like, have to sit down and be humble and listen and ask, how can we be of support? I live 8 miles away from the Chevron plant down in Richmond. That means me traveling down in the plug-in hybrid that I got and talking to folks who live immediately downstream and asking what we can do. But I've also seen the power of local progress. To ours and Fatima's point, it may take years, but we do have the people power. It's all about getting it organized so that ultimately someone like Senator Storn can have more fellow champions in his committee so that we can actually get good shit done. As the IPCC says, we have 12 years to get good shit done, by the way. We have 12 years left.
Well, let's do it. So one of the more controversial issues among Democrats is land use, and we saw several bills this cycle that tried to deal with the housing crisis. Some that passed, some that didn't pass. And as we look through the issue of housing through the lens of the climate crisis, what kinds of policies do you want to see passed? How do you think that that intersection works, where to make sure that we're seeing the best climate outcomes as we do our housing policy?
I'll start, but I know Igor can speak a lot more about this. I was just thinking about solar, right? When we think of building housing, just connecting to the climate, when I do believe we need more density, we've never met our housing goals, right? In our state, which is an issue. But we also need to think about building sustainable housing, affordable housing, right? And so, Igor talked about this, but we've seen the utility power grab that's happened, that's trying to kill solar, right? And I know, like I talk a lot about, frontline communities. I mean, we have to make it, that so that we can have solar, especially, starting with the communities most impacted, right? So that's one thing, just creating sustainable housing, which I believe will like reduce their electric bills and everything and make it better for them economically as well. And I was going to add one last thing, kind of from the last question a little bit was, oh, sorry, one quick thing, really quick about that too, just about land use. We have to also think about, where we're building our housing, right? So a lot of our housing is built far away from where people live, not where they live, sorry, where they work or where they have to go to school or something. So we have to think about, urban planning in reducing the carpool, right? That people have to, the carpooling that a lot of people in California, I know in LA do, which is contributing to our climate change. So when we think about building housing, right, we got to think strategically about, about travel and getting more cars off the road. Eventually, we got to get to electric cars and things like that. But I think being conscious of bringing where we're building housing in that equation is important. The other thing with land use is that I see that's a lot in South LA. A lot of developments are approved without, kind of having, following environmental code or going through the required environmental kind of process, which I think is an issue. And, we see housing kind of being built on land that might still have lead or arsenic or things like that. So I think that's also very problematic. And one, thing I wanted to add from the last question was Igor. No one has brought up like really MHF yet, but there's, I believe, only 2 refineries in California. One is in Richmond and one is in Wilmington that use modified hydrofluoric acid. And this is something really small, so maybe Senator Stern, we could talk about this if the group hasn't talked to you, but that we could talk about why the refineries are using MHF, which is very dangerous. I know Richmond had an explosion, right, Igor, that it could be very fatal, and the refineries don't have to use this chemical. There is another alternative. And so, just the last question, that's something we can do. I talked about a Green New Deal, but even something just, really simple, seemingly, that should be able to pass is not being able to, get to be presented as a bill at the state legislature. Sorry, I deterred from the question. Well, I know it was land use, but sorry, I wanted to add that.
That's okay. Appreciate it. Does anyone else want to comment on our housing bills and that hour?
I want to see decarbonized buildings, homes, especially first, maybe public housing or affordable housing. So electrifying existing first and then new homes. I also, as a renter, I really dream with the day where every renter in California and in the country has the opportunity to be powered with 100% renewable energy. So, I'm going to get very wonky right now, and bear with me, but we need things like virtual metering, virtual net metering, for example, which is the idea that, you can kind of get your power in a multifamily home and distribute that so everyone can get a fair share when they want it. We have also net metering, which has been attacked over and over. And the net metering is the program that, you can make money out of the solar that you harness, sell it back to the utility, make some money or offset your bill. I also, like a solar for renters, I really want to see more and more. And this is not so much related to energy, but I have been really, really embedded learning more about composting and waste. So how are we going to become maybe 50% waste city or maybe zero waste city? so that, so that we like the cycle of all this plastic. I mean, like, guys, I can use here 3 hours trying to making the connection with plastics and how that's connected to the fossil fuel industry, which is connected to the money and politics, to which is connected to people that are not real environmentalists getting elected and such, and passing policies that are mediocre. We need to get over being mediocre. We have everything to be excellent, especially when it comes to our planet. So we need to demand that. We need to get, we need to get more savvy about it and demand a real energy democracy where we can generate local jobs, where we can put people back to school, back to work from things like the Green New Deal for public schools, which will inject a lot of funding to reinvest on our public schools. So those are some of the things that I would love to see. And those are, I think that some of them are moving at the local level, at the state level, and definitely we see it on the infrastructure bill coming up, hopefully.
Yeah, I just want to state, I agree with all of that. I just want to state really, really clearly that housing absolutely is a major important climate policy. I think the climate movement is not focused enough on housing and land use issues. I'm all for 100% renewable electricity and electrification. But the main reason that people are driving such long distances in Southern California is because they can't afford to live near where they. And people need to have affordable housing for equity issues and for all kinds of reasons, but it's also a serious climate issue. And the UC Berkeley Cool Climate Study estimated that urban infill was number 3 on the list of most greenhouse gas reduction potential for local climate action. So, I think that's really important to say this is climate policy, and especially affordable housing near where people have jobs and go to school and all of these things. We can't just keep stretching outwards and sprawling out into the desert and having people have these long 2-hour commutes in order to be able to afford where they live.
And I'll add one more in there. And I saw Kevin in the chat who's been awesome on these issues, and Andrew and a few others, and Mike, obviously, with his work at SMR. But, we'll see how much affordability, near opportunity we get out of the housing bills that passed this last session. I'm really hoping it results in that kind of progress that was promised. I was a bit of a fly in the ointment because I was running first it was an amendment to all those bills, but then it was its own standalone bill, SB 55, which would have actually barred any future development into, we used fire zones as sort of the proxy, but things like, building 35,000 new units out in Newhall Ranch and calling that the solution to the housing crisis, to me, feels like you're kind of just sprawling further and further, versus if you actually were doing real work along the boulevards in Santa Monica, using actual, abundant housing infill proposal. Move LA's got a really exciting, I think, look at how to really tackle LA and do some retrofitting of commercial and automatic rezoning in there. But there's some tussles going on, because is the goal of the housing just housing, or is the goal housing that's affordable and doesn't burn up the planet? So if it's just housing, put it anywhere and we're solving it, we're going to get some odd outcomes. And I'm worried about that. And you've seen it actually play out in the courts. Like San Diego was trying to get this massive new development through, and the AG actually challenged it and said, you're building in a fire zone. You guys didn't take any of that into account. So we'll see. It's tough because the high value properties are in districts like mine, in Malibu. That's where people want to build some new housing, is in the Santa Monica Mountains, or in, some out in Porter Ranch. Lorraine sees them, they love to chop mountains out there in the North Valley. So you don't see those same developers coming into Santa Monica and see how they can build affordable housing. And so that's been my central critique. And I know I've parted company with my leadership on those issues from time to time, but there's too much developer dollars moving around on that stuff. And I think if we can hit hard on affordability and climate justice as our central litmus tests for what makes a good housing bill, I think we'll make a lot of progress.
Yeah, and I don't want to be coming in at the tail end of Senator Storm. That was so on point. But I'm just gonna like kind of begin right where he left off. Everything is political. Regional housing needs allocation numbers are political. The last one, someone told me this, so I didn't fact check it. So maybe you can nod if this is in fact the case. The only local jurisdiction that met RHNA numbers for below market rate was Beverly Hills. Why? Because Beverly Hills had 3 units allocated. So, right now we're fighting to ensure that every jurisdiction provides their fair share. And that's going to look different if you are a town in the North Bay, or you are San Francisco, or you're LA, or you're Berkeley, or you're Oakland. But the point being is that everyone, we have to stop using things that are not that are not legitimate concerns, like aesthetics, to stop the ability for folks to not have to drive till they qualify out into the burbs. And that is exactly what is happening. One thing that I was really disappointed about, and I know the governor, I think, left some breadcrumbs. Maybe he's going to sign a budget that will include this, let's hope. But it was really disappointing. I got a lot of renters organizations to reject, and ultimately slay the Republican recall. And I still would have done it just because of how obnoxious the other guy running would have been, to say the least. But the governor vetoing AB 1487, which would have been a statewide protection for tenants that are about to lose their housing. I mean, how I got into combating climate change was through housing advocacy. It was the typical story of an immigrant. I had to travel all over to finally find a place that I could call home. And I settled here, and I have been fighting for everyone else to be able to have a home that they don't get displaced out of. Same thing with the planet. We're seeing an increase in climate refugees. And unfortunately, we're going to continue to do that until we really get really start passing bills and signing bills that really hit on all three, the 3 Ps of housing: production, protection, and preservation of existing naturally occurring affordable housing.
Great, thank you all so much. So now, since we're all here on the west side of LA County, we should be talking about traffic pollution as well. Igor, I know you've got your fair share of traffic in the Bay Area too, not to exclude you. So there's lots of solutions proposed here. Congestion pricing, where you have to pay a toll to drive in certain heavily trafficked areas. Road sharing, where you can only drive on certain days of the week. And then also the idea of making public transportation just free for all users. Are any of these ideas or other ideas like those practical that could actually lead to big changes in how we think about transportation and climate policy? Igor, I see you're nodding your head.
Yes, all of the above. I don't want to dominate this discussion, and I want to hear what is going on in SoCal. But I think the onus is not just because it's so convenient to say the legislature needs to do more of X, Y, and Z, and they absolutely should do that. But it's also incumbent on us. And I mean that in the sense that this is all about working along intersectional lines. Someone posted earlier the importance of a just transition. Absolutely. Like, It can't be us against them. Similarly, on transit equity, the Sierra Club no longer has the authority, the moral authority, or any kind of authority to be able to say, oh, we're only over here working on conservation, transit equity, go talk to these other groups. So we have been really trying to break down those silos. During the pandemic, there were a lot of open streets that got started following a European model. And you know, just trying to move away from this notion that made this country as car-centric as it has become, to the detriment of those who use other mobility options, those who are pedestrians, those who use bikes, those who use other micromobility, those who use public transit. We're about to introduce a referral through the Berkeley City Council, which unanimously passed through our elected transit board last week, which would allow for free transit on Sundays. And there have been pilots already done. This is important to bring back ridership to the numbers that it had. But more importantly, it's about getting folks in, you know, it's an equity thing in so many ways. So I can talk about how as a tenant in a multifamily housing development that's existing construction, I have to walk 8 blocks to charge my Volt that I just got. But a lot of folks are not even in a position where they can afford a Volt, or for that matter, any vehicle. And we need to be ensure, a lot of these are essential workers, by the way. How are they going to be able to get to work and from work and get their kids to and from school and do whatever they need to do to be able to live a fulfilling life with their family in a way that is safe, in a way that is convenient for them. So I agree with all of those suggestions that John put out there, and I'm looking forward to hearing from what you all are doing in SoCal so that we can learn from you up here.
Yeah, great. Anybody else thoughts on this? Yeah, Lorraine?
Yeah, I just want to echo the all of the above sentiment. You know, these are all solutions that are being used in other cities elsewhere on the planet and are working. And a lot of it really does have to do about designing our cities and our transit systems and our housing developments around people, not around cars. We really do a lot of designing things around cars. And I think we know that many areas that are much more enjoyable and much more livable are cities that are really designed around people and all transportation models. It doesn't have to exclude cars altogether. And wouldn't, but you know, making it so that everybody can get around no matter what form of transportation they're using is the key point. And when it comes to free transit, you know, where I am right now, the buses are actually free because they're not collecting fares during COVID, and they have been for a while. So that is pretty exciting, and it's, you know, a bit of momentum. We just kind of need to keep that up. And it's surprising how much of the revenue collected from fares spent on policing fares, and that, you know, like enforcing the collection of fares, and that enforcement is often done in a racially unjust way as well in the policing. So I think it's a great option for equity and for improving on climate.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, Henry.
Well, I got to jump, but I'll leave you one stat. The average Angelino making $80,000 or less spends more on their transportation, more on their car and getting around than on their food and healthcare combined. There was a recent study on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So transportation is breaking families economically. If you solve the transportation problem, you actually fix the entire family budget, and you free up those dollars so they can, you know, you can take care of the health of your kids or pay for education. So that that $5 a gallon or whatever it's going to be, depending on what the world looks like. And then the maintenance cost of an internal combustion engine, and then all the commuting, if we switch that out and say by the Olympics, Los Angeles is no home to internal combustion engines anymore. And either you get free transit or you're in a clean car. I don't know. Why not aim that high? Like, why not, when the whole world shows up here, have a city we can be really proud of? I think we should aim that high. And I was just going to say in the chat, though, as outraged and kind of like despondent as I sort of can get, tonight's been awesome because so many superstars on this call in terms of like each one of you, I just strike fear into the hearts of so many out there. You don't actually, Lorraine was talking about organizing, or Otto is too. Don't think that you need to organize the thousands. Like this group, right? Organize 20 and focus on your pressure point and pick your spot. You're going to get it. We're not that hard to access. Don't think that you need to mobilize, all of LA will be with you. All of California will be with you. The whole world will be with you. But pick your spots and like, just be that thorn in the side, and wherever it is. It's about the PUC in Aliso Canyon, make it that. If it's about Carson and cleaning up the sewage, or MHF, make it that. And just pick your spots and hit it hard. And I don't know. I feel like just being around a lot of dangerous people like tonight, it's been good. So thanks, John. Appreciate you putting me here. And Igor, it was cool to hear you we need you up in Berkeley. Let's get Skinner going. She's off with Hertzberg on an airplane flying off to Glasgow right now. So get Nancy cooking on all this stuff. And the rest, it's been awesome. Auda and Fatima and Lorraine and everybody else, thanks for having me. And hey, special shout out to Patricia Hoffman, wherever she is out there. Hi, miss you. Okay.
Thanks so much, Senator.
Yeah.
Great to have you here.
Yeah, I'm gonna go be a dad.
All right, great. Send our best to Ava. Okay, so now I want to go to the question that we've been kind of dancing around a little bit tonight. Talk about the California Democratic Party. So Igor, I want to go to you first because you are one of the signatories on this letter, along with some of the other caucus chairs. There's a special meeting of the executive board of the California Democratic Party called for this Sunday, which was called by 50 executive board members, including at least a couple of our panelists tonight. So I want to ask, and the plan is to ask the e-board to vote to stop accepting donations from fossil fuel industry and also police unions. So Igor, let me go to you first, and then we'll hear from everybody else. But can you explain the events that led you and Amar and the other caucus chairs to call this meeting, and what are you hoping to accomplish this weekend? I think we might even have some undecided e-board members in the audience tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to engage with you all. If any of you are undecided still, I had a great talk with someone today who's here who's undecided. I will not name names. Happy to talk with you all. We'll leave my phone number in the chat after this. Happy to talk via judgment-free, just exchange of ideas. But here's why I signed the petition. And I joined at this, we just got the 9th caucus chair to also express their support. 54 executive board members, hundreds of delegates, several resolutions that have passed, not just central committees at this point, but regions. 3 CDP regions have endorsed what we're trying to do. What led to this was very unfortunate. It didn't have to come down to a special meeting. There were so many off-ramps that could have been taken. Back in 2020, there was a committee that R.L. Miller, my much more amazing predecessor, was on, and it unanimously recommended that the party not take contributions from certain sources of fossil fuels. That report came out in 2020. So literally the party has sat on that report without taking any action on it till now. which is what led us to just this past August at the e-board meeting, try to force this issue through a vote. There were 2 separate votes, one on fossil fuels, one on law enforcement contributions, both of which were ruled out of order. Same thing happened in 2020, right after the horrendous murder of George Floyd, say his name. The Finance Committee passed a very strong recommendation not to accept contributions from law enforcement sources. And again, the party has not acted on that either. And it wasn't even until our petition was received that we got a written confirmation, which was one of the things that we requested, at the very least, until we can vote on this issue, that the party will continue to not take this money. It has not taken this money in 2021, but in October 2020, actually on 2 separate occasions, once right before the November election in 2020, and once a few months before that, and just a few weeks after the ad hoc committee report was issued, the party took 6 figures of money from a number of fossil fuel organizations that were actually included on that list. And SEMPRA was one of them. SEMPRA was apparently on a good list, but I posted in the chat earlier and I will post it again. SEMPRA is, I mean, literally the Sammy Roth article says SEMPRA is doubling down on fossil fuels. SEMPRA also owns 2 utilities that want to raise your solar, your neighbor's solar, your school's solar, or your children's school solar, the small business owner that you go to for various things, their solar. And then all of us love our fresh food that we buy. It wants to increase by $1,000 a month solar for farmers. So why do we have a super progressive platform and very good resolutions that I'm very proud of working with all of you on to make sure they happen, when then the party fails to put literally their money where the mouth is? You all just had an oil spill down here. I am so deeply sorry. I've been, checking the news every day to see how the recovery efforts are going. I know that the setback protected wildlife by 30 years or more. Up here, I don't need to tell you that Northern California is on fire, just as Southern California is also on fire. Today, a drought emergency was declared by the governor, and the IPCC report again says we have 12 years. 12 years. So I'm a millennial. We're discussing whether we want to have kids right now because we want what every family would want for their kids and their grandkids, a better future than the one they had. And it's really hard to think about that when we're looking at all the different potential cataclysms that are happening now that are not these academic things in a faraway land. Climate change is real and it's here. And yet we are refusing as a party to stop taking these contributions. And we are continuing to delay. Well, justice delayed is justice denied. And that's why we're going to be hearing from a number of speakers, including Alicia Garza and Miss Wanda, who lost her son, Oscar Grant, in the hands of a BART police officer. We're going to hear from the Sunrise Movement. And then we're going to go on record with a public vote. And I think all of us have to ask at this point, which side are we going to be in? Because the folks that are going to judge us are going to be the community that we're here to represent.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Would you want to go out? Okay.
I just want to like double jazz that pitch. And as the e-board member for AD 50, I want to encourage all of you to vote for this and to support this and to call other e-board members or other board members for that matter to remind their e-board members that we must vote for this. We're counting on you to make sure that this passes and that people that are not taking fossil fuel money, that are going to act bold on climate, have a chance. And this is our moment, guys. So it's time for us to be amazing Democrats, not just great, like amazing Democrats, and vote to get this passed.
Thank you, Ara. Okay, I wanted to add, so Igor and Ara did a great job wrapping that up. I'm going to add another element to it. This is not a political move by any caucus chair at all. Don't listen to that narrative. And I hate when that happens, because if anything, folks like me and Igor that live in, folks that live in marginalized communities have pushed our chairs more, my chair in the Progressive Caucus. So don't believe that narrative. I've pushed, I'll say his name, Amr from the Progressive Caucus always gets a lot of heat as being like anti-Rusty, but in fact, I have pushed him more to take action and do more, and so people might not know that because I'm a new delegate, but I'm probably even more angry than him, to be honest, and if I pushed him more. And this is not an all or none approach. I know the party has also talked about a committee, to look at how we're going to finance the party. Just so you know, all of us believe in that too. We're just saying we don't want fossil fuel money and law enforcement money to even be part of that discussion. We're not going against, what the executive board of the party is saying. We're actually with them. We're just saying, you know what, we just want to make sure that this money is not in consideration. And the reason we're doing that is because right now, and I learned this being a new delegate, until the e-board votes on something, because another narrative, I'm going to dispel myths that we hear is, well, the party's not taking this money anymore. I believe them. That's not the way laws work. That's not the way the rules of a private organization like the Democratic Party work. The e-board has to vote on it to formalize it. Even if I'm a leader, you shouldn't trust me, or there should be laws in place that hold me accountable. That's what this is about. Fine. The executive board hasn't taken this money, but what's to stop an executive board 20 years from now or 30 years from now, or the finance committee from making sure that they really don't, take this money? And we're just saying we want to formalize it, right? We want to formalize that this money's not taken. This is a no-brainer. And we're also with what the executive board suggests in talking about ways to finance the party. So if anything, we're just embellishing and supporting, right, this effort, to really think of how else we're going to fund the party. And the other thing I wanted to say was, and the other thing I want to talk about that some of you might be facing internally that are e-board members is there's more of us than of them, right? There's always more of us than of them. And I'll just second what Igor said. What side, right, do we want to be on, right? Do we want to be on the side of fear? Do we want to be sheep that merely follow? Or do we want to stand, for your community? I know each of us here probably experiences environmental injustice, right? And let's stand on the right side. Let's remember there's always more of us than them. And let's remember, this is a moment in history, whether it's women's suffrage or, for pro-choice or the civil rights movement. There were folks there too. What did Martin Luther King say? I don't want to misquote him. I'm not going to quote him. I'm just going to paraphrase it because I'm not going to misquote it. But the biggest barrier, right, to progress is when good people don't stand up for the right thing. I'm paraphrasing, right? But just remember, it's not enough to say, I believe in this, but I don't think the time is right, and I don't want to upset anyone. That's not enough. It takes for a movement to really move, it takes good people to take, yes, that risk and stand with people, and yes, against leadership sometimes. Although we're not, like I said, we're supporting the party's efforts, but if you see it that way, we're not really going against leadership. We're just saying we want you all to join us, and we want you to remember what Martin Luther King Jr. said, in that that's what it takes for progress. It's not for the activists on the street. It's for the the folks that consider themselves liberal, being willing to stand with the folks on the streets. That's what makes real process and bends that arc towards justice. So just remember that.
I certainly agree. And just to extend it a little bit beyond the e-board, I would like to see fossil fuel money in every sector, become like a pariah, something that is just everybody agrees that this is destroying our future and we're not going to be part of those investments. So I work on an academic campus. We are working to divest the CSU system throughout the state. Because I don't believe that my university should be investing in fossil fuel companies that are destroying the future of the students that we're teaching. And so just invite all of you to get involved in, asking your bank to divest, asking your corporation or where, whatever your workplace is to divest from fossil fuels. Nobody should be touching or taking fossil fuel money.
If I could add just one last thing, what I wanted to add, I forgot to add this point. Just so you know, for full transparency, the reason we're formalizing this vote is because we want the party to get to a place where it says in the bylaws that the Democratic Party will not endorse any candidates that take fossil fuel or law enforcement money. And eventually we want to add in real estate money too, because that's also, awful. But imagine that. I want you to think about what Senator Stern said today, how inspiring he was. And imagine if we have everyone there like Senator Stern and Alex Lee. Can you imagine the type of progress we would make for our state? So just so you know, that's the vision I have in my mind, is once we get this passed, we're not stopping here. We are going to fight for the party to change its rules, right? So that we only endorse candidates that don't take that money. So like Lauren says, it becomes a pariah that you don't belong in the Democratic Party if you take it. So I just want you to imagine the type of state that we can have and the type of, real urgent legislation we can get passed and when we achieve that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody's comments there. And I want to thank everybody for coming. Senator Stern, Igor, Lorraine, Aura, Fatima, thank you all so much for being here. We're so glad to have you. And, everybody take a look in the chat. We're getting all the contact information in there so you can stay in touch about Aura's campaign for Sierra Club and to chat with Igor and everybody about the special meeting on Saturday. All the contact info is there. So thank you, everybody. Very informative discussion. I really appreciated hearing everyone's opinions. And now we're going to go over to our last section of the evening, which is a discussion of the upcoming bylaws amendments. We'll be voting on this next month, and Mike Soloff has been chairing the bylaws committee, so I'll pass it over to him.
Thanks, John. We're operating on a slightly different plane here, but it's nevertheless necessary. I think the point tonight is just everybody should have received a link to the proposed bylaw changes. It's marked in red line. Dan Hall and I will highlight the changes. If people have some questions they want to raise tonight, they're welcome to, just to get some about the thinking. If people have questions between now and the next meeting when we'll actually vote on that, they should certainly feel free to reach out to me or to Dan or to anybody else on the board. We'll try and answer your questions, and then at the next meeting, there'll actually be an opportunity for people to propose changes if there are other changes that they want to make or don't like these changes, and then we'll have to take a vote. There's one part of this that we're required to complete at the next meeting, which is we need to have a formal grievance policy. That's a requirement to maintain our charter from LACDP. Everything else we're doing, we think, as the executive board, strengthens our bylaws, but our charter doesn't depend on that happening at the next meeting. But while we're doing it, it seemed to make sense. So I don't know, John, you want me to screen share so people can see the red line, or do you want me to just quickly walk through it?
You and Dan are both co-hosts, so if you want to screen share, you should be able to.
Okay, so here is what you all have access to and can study at another time. Just go through this first change here was just to greatly expand and update our definition of all the areas of equality that we're trying to promote. And this is taken straight from our existing anti-harassment policy as updated by the last e-board meeting where CAST was added to the list as well. Other than some things to make things more clear, this is an important one. As I think John mentioned earlier, there are 2 new positions being added to the board: the Vice President of Diversity Inclusion and the Vice President of Legislation. As I think you all know, we've had very active committees on that this year, and we're now want to have that formally be part of the board. These are just typo kinds of things, and here's a description of where those 2 new positions fit in the order of succession. Here is some clarification about the appointments to the composition of the board. There are 2 things. One, that when making appointments to the board, because the board consists of, will now be, I think, 12 elected members. I believe there are 7 officers now and 5 members, but don't hold me to the math there. But basically, but we also have the power to appoint up to 5 more members. And the point we're making is that in considering appointments, we want to see promotion of diversity, commitment, and expertise, what folks will bring to the board. We're also indicating that to be on the executive board, you need to reside, work, or attend school in Santa Monica. And the president or co-presidents must themselves be residents of Santa Monica. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. This was to clarify that if the executive board is going to make a recommendation to the membership, that it needs to be an absolute majority of the executive board. There could be conflicts that greatly reduce the number of people who can actually vote. And we felt that for the executive board to actually be making a recommendation to the body, it should compose at least a majority of that. These are other technical details. This is just to make clear that once we have a grievance procedure, the remedies in the grievance procedure are authorized. This is our expenditures. I think it had been at $250 was the maximum the board could authorize. And it could go up to 500 if that was required before the next meeting, subject to the body's approval, the membership as a whole. Those figures seem to be somewhat outdated and a little bit low in today's world. So the suggestion was to up that to 500 to 1,000. And also to make clear in the bylaws that what we've always been doing, which is expending considerably more from that than that in support of making known to the community the endorsements that this club makes ultimately through votes of the membership. We just wanted to be clear that that is in fact authorized by the bylaws. So that's all this is doing there. And we also, unfortunately, having faced a special election this time around and people threatening to do things to create special elections, we wanted to have an expenditure limit for that as well. So this is about the election of officers, and the main thing these changes do are, to be clear, to set out much more clearly the process that people will get notice of the upcoming election of the board no later than 45 days prior to the meeting, that any members in good standing can nominate as candidates for the office, for any office they want, that then the board, if it wants, can try and recommend a candidate for one or more offices. It's not required to. That's the same as present. And then we'll send to the membership no later than 20 days in advance a list of all the candidates. And as we always have, if there are more than one candidate running for an office, those candidates get to address the membership before they vote. The main purpose of this, in addition to bringing clarity, was so that the body would know who's actually running for offices well in advance of the meeting, and not just on the day of the election if there is an actual contest, so that people have an opportunity to think about candidates. That's just a clarification. So this relates to the other one. This says that for purposes of making actual endorsements for an office or for a ballot measure, people get to vote on the same things that they get to vote on their actual ballot when it's given to them. Or if you're a student and so, you know, a younger person who can't yet register to vote, or you're someone whose immigration status doesn't permit you to register to vote, all those people have always been welcome in our club and continue to be welcome in our club, so long as they indicate that when the time comes and they are able to register that they will be Democrats, those folks would also get to vote. But the point is, if it's an election in for offices that only people in Santa Monica get to vote for, then the members of the club who are residents of Santa Monica get to vote for that. If it's for the Malibu, Santa Monica school districts, whether it's college or otherwise, those folks get to vote on that. If it's for the assembly district, whatever number it will be called in the future, at the moment it's AD 50, assuming it stays that designation, anybody who lives within AD 50 can vote for that. If it's for county supervisor, anybody in whatever district we end up in the next thing can vote for that. If it's for the sheriff, for example, if we take an endorsement vote on Rambo for sheriff, for example, versus Villanueva, anybody who lives in the county and is a member of the club can do that. And then obviously on state Senate, it would be the same thing. If you live within the Senate district, and for state measures, obviously anyone who lives in the state would be able to do that. And I want to be clear what the thinking is here. We love and welcome and respect all of our members from wherever they are. In fact, some of the people who first got me interested in this club are people who don't live here in Santa Monica and the like. But this club is a geographically based club. It's the only outlet for Democrats in Santa Monica, for example, to express a preference of who they want to be running on the ballot for them. And people who live elsewhere have many other ways to express their views on what should happen in Santa Monica. They have LA County Democratic Party, where the 2.3 million Democrats who don't live in Santa Monica get to weigh in. We have our very much appreciated sister clubs and Stonewall and Heart of LA and various others that are based on non-geographical affinities, and they all are free to endorse here. But this club is the only outlet for people here in a town that's essentially all Democrats, and the fights are between Democrats for all of this to express their preference. And so that's why we thought people who should be able to sort of primary the people who are going to have to live with the results. And so that's why this is in here. Okay. That's just for clarification. Here now is in the committee structure. This is in the Political Action Committee, now that we have a legislative committee, which does some of the same things that were within the context of the Political Action Committee before. So we clarified what the actual role of the Political Action Committee is, and that's much more focused on actual campaigning. And we added descriptions of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee and the Legislative Committee, since those were created but were not in the bylaws before. Now they're permanent committees that have vice presidents who
aren't part of the executive board. The rest of this is largely just occasional technical things. The policy against harassment and workplace violence, which is on our website. We just wanted to make clear that is in fact part of the bylaws. And then we've created a grievance procedure. And the civility pledge that we just passed tonight, we also want to make part of the bylaws. And so this is the existing anti-harassment policy with just some technical changes to be a little clearer in some places. And because there is a grievance procedure and because this is something that can be enforced through that grievance procedure, when it's a member raising potential grievances against other members, we put in a provision allowing for that enforcement, but also leaving in place the option if there's some slightly different procedures in the existing anti-harassment policy, and that some members, if they want to avail themselves of that, still have that option as well. And we created a grievance procedure in great detail. Folks can take a look at that. The one thing I would raise here is that we'll have a permanent grievance committee. And you can see that we want it to be at least, or I shouldn't say at least, we want it to consist of 3 members who are self-identified females, 2 who are not self-identified females. At least one of the members has to be a person of color. At least 2 have to be attorneys. Then we'll create 2 alternate members and 2 what we're calling restorative justice officers. I'll explain what that is in a second. Each of those, the one will be a self-identified female and one will not be a self-identified female. Restorative justice officer, what that means is that the LACDP suggested policy, and one that the board thinks is a good one, is when possible to try and resolve disputes among members of the club through restorative justice before we get to formal adjudication. But there has to be a way of doing that. So we need some folks who will try and do that piece of it. And I'm raising all of this besides some just generally. John was talking earlier about people indicating that they might want to run for the board, or they might want to be appointed to the board or for an officer position. I'd also throw out there that if you're potentially interested in serving on this grievance committee, if we're lucky, it won't be too big of a job, but it's very important, obviously, that we have it in place, because if there are grievances, they need to be taken quite seriously, or if you're willing to be a person who would try and do restorative justice, mediate the dispute before that, let us know that as well. Because when we pass this at the next meeting, which we're going to have to do because we have to have a grievance procedure, assuming we stick with this format, then we do have to put this committee in place in about 7 weeks following that. And this is just all the details of it, which people can read for themselves. And then the last thing is the civility pledge, which we just passed tonight, and just putting that as Appendix C. So that's an overview of the changes. And before we see if anybody has any questions or comments on that, Dan, is there anything you want to add to what I've said?
You got it all, Mike. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm going to stop screen sharing, but if there's something somebody wants to see specifically, I'll bring it back up, but then you can't see people when you're screen sharing. So Ted, I see you have your hand up. I assume, John, it's appropriate to take people's questions. Yes. Sure. So Ted, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think it was in the first red line section you brought up, which had to do with the enhanced non-discrimination policy. In order to, if I recall correctly, there's a lot to digest, but it said something that membership is open to all citizens, and then it went in to describe various categories of individuals, including, not counting people's citizenship against them. So I wonder why that word citizen is in the very beginning. Wouldn't it just be better to say open to all and take out the word citizen so that we're not one way or another, either proactively or subliminally saying if you're not because of your immigration status, you may not be eligible to be a member. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. Let me put it back up and then I'll tell you what I think the discussion was, if I'm remembering correctly, but this is certainly something that you could raise, and it could be something we could discuss at the meeting itself, and it will be the body's decision. So I think you're referring to this right here, number 5,
yes,
which is so let me just, so everybody can see, this is the club is dedicated to furthering the political goals and aspirations of the people of Santa Monica and the community in which it functions. And to that end, a variety of things, yada, 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 to open the democratic process to all citizens on the basis of equality, et cetera, and all of those groups. And then I think the second thing you were referring to was that, just so everybody understands what we're talking about, that our membership, you have to be a registered Democrat, except that if you can't actually register to vote because of age or citizenship, and you say that you would be a Democrat if and when you become eligible, then you can be a member of the club. And that's specifically designed to get people who are too young to vote, and also people because of their immigration status are unable to actually vote. So they're all members of the club and they have a full right to vote here. So your question is, why is in this process, does it say to open the democratic process to all citizens? And I think the view was that what that historically had been representing meant the electoral process, and that that is something that is based on citizenship here and elsewhere. So
yeah, I guess to me it says to all citizens regardless of citizenship. So even taking out the optics of it all, it doesn't make sense. I wonder why I wouldn't just say to all Democrats and future Democrats, or just to all.
I see your point. I think that's a good question. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll figure out how to, or somebody will have to figure out how we make that consistent, and we can resolve it at the next meeting. Judy?
So I want to agree with what Ted just said and say that City Council dealt with this around commission members. It used to say citizens somehow. I can't remember the actual language, but we changed it so that back in the day, so that
you recall what you changed it to?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
But we
do you recall
not,
where we should look to get that
we
language?
changed
So we
it
may
so
want to
that
do it.
we changed it so that you did not have to be a citizen to be on a commission. And that was kind of a big deal, but I think the language really speaks for itself, that when a person who is not yet a citizen or not a citizen at all reads citizen, even when those of us who are used to that kind of language don't even trigger on it, they go, oh, they don't mean me, they don't want me. And I think that if we can find other ways to be inclusive without using the word citizen, it would be much better, much more inclusive.
If you can think of where whatever the thing is that you say was changed, we may be able to crib some language from that. Because it's certainly the intent of everybody on the executive board that everybody's welcome. We're making clear that you don't actually have to be a citizen or on a path to citizenship or anything else to vote in the club, endorsements or any of that. So that's certainly not our intent. And Ted has pointed out that we're inconsistent there. So we'll come up with some suggestions for that at the next meeting.
Good.
But others can feel free to do it too.
I think it kind of fits into the category of microaggression where we don't really think about it until somebody says, wait a minute, what about me? And we just need to be a little bit more sensitive in how we use the language. But I never thought anybody intended to exclude anybody in that. It's the language thing rather than a intent. That's all.
Hey,
Yep.
John and Mike. I think this may have been a version control or transcription error. Could we take a potential motion now to change that wording? That way it falls within the timeline required for notification for bylaws. And that could be part of the notification tonight, or how would that work?
Well, we're within the less than 30 days, so I don't know that we can do that, but it may be that the vote of the body, like Mike was saying, on in November may suffice.
Right. We can fix it at the November meeting from the floor. And if the executive board wants to come up with some proposed language, well, it's not an official thing, we can certainly present it at that meeting. So, Aura, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to reflect a little bit on what you guys are talking about documented or undocumented. I want to also just remind people that a lot of our undocumented communities pay taxes, even when they don't get any benefits out of this. We see other cities like San Francisco where undocumented parents can vote for school board members. And I know that this could be very controversial in all the states, but we're in California, where we are a state of immigrants, where we take great pride to be good neighbors and support, those that come here seeking a better world and a better life, like myself. So I strongly encourage you guys to also allow folks that are contributing to making our city beautiful, our state amazing, that are picking our food, that are taking care of our kids, that are planting our gardens, to also have a chance to have their voices heard in a way of a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for tonight? Like I say, this is hardly your last chance to comment. Everybody has this, they can look at it. If they have other good questions and comments, feel free to share them with us in advance, because, for example, what we're hearing tonight is something that I think the board agrees with. So we can make the meeting go a lot more smoothly if we do all of that in advance, or to the extent we can. So Sam, you had something you wanted to say tonight? You need to unmute, Sam.
I keep forgetting to unmute. Here is where I need to tell you the environmental panel did not mention anything very much about running out of water. That's, if we run out of water, what does transportation, it's going to be hard to do anything if we don't have any water to drink. So this is what we should be talking about.
Okay, so that's a very good question. It looks like Aura would like to respond to it. We can do that in just a second, Sam. I just want to make sure we're finished with the discussion on the bylaws. Is there anyone who has any questions or comments about the bylaws? Okay, great. So Aura, did you want to respond to that question, or?
Hi, Sam. I just responded over text. I 100% agree with you. We need to stop our reliance on imported water. Here in Los Angeles, we bring our water from the beautiful Sierras, from indigenous land that actually don't get the chance to have, sometimes in that case, clean water. We can adopt things like more stormwater capturing, more recycled water, and other practices that we can, do at home. But I know the meeting has taken a long time, so we can talk more offline.
Thank you so much. So now I see Kevin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and I apologize to the group for not doing this sooner, but meeting on Zoom, it's hard to stand up and wave your arms to get attention. So I wasn't able to do that. I want to make an urgent motion, and I believe it's urgent because the e-board meeting will happen before the next meeting of this club. So I move that the Santa Monica Democratic Club support the effort to remove fossil fuel money from the California Democratic Party, and that we convey that to the e-board members and everybody else appropriate, including the media.
Thank you, Kevin. Is there a second?
Peter, I second.
Okay.
This is Peter, second.
Motion made by Kevin and seconded by Peter. So let's have all the club members who are here. If there's a discussion, otherwise we'll call the vote. Okay, great. So all those in favor of the motion? Okay, there's 18 yes votes. Let's put the hands down. Okay, and now let's see, are there any no votes? No votes, any abstentions? Any abstain on this one? Okay, one abstention from Mike. Okay, so
Just to be clear, I'm voting on Saturday, and so this isn't the right place for me to cast my vote.
Understood.
I am abstaining as well.
Thanks, Derek. Okay, so with that said, we have 18 yes votes and 2 abstentions. So the motion passes and the Democratic Club supports the action. So thank you, Kevin, for making the motion and Peter for seconding it. And I think that was a great decision at the end of the meeting.
Thank you all.
So just to wrap up, as a reminder, we'll be meeting again on November 17th. We're going to have a great panel on this discussion of women's reproductive justice, and we will have our last meeting of the year. Looking forward to it. And until then, hold on, you know how it goes. Advanced.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Santa winds blowing hot from the north. We were born to ride. Roll down the window, put down the top, crank up the Beach Boys, baby. Don't let the music stop. We gonna ride it till we just can't ride it no more. From the side bay to the valley, from the west side to the east side, everybody very happy, 'cause the sun is shining all the time. It's like another perfect day. I love LA. We love it. I love LA. We love it. We love it. Look at that mountain. Look at those trees. Look at that bum over there, man. He's down on his knees. Look at these women. Ain't nothing like them, no.